Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. If you are new here, I am Jonathan Martins and we've been working through Azure Cloud Labs step by step. And these labs are basically going to help us build real hands-on cloud skills that actually go beyond theory. Trust me. Before we dive right in, do not forget to like, to subscribe and turn on your notifications so that you do not miss the next lab in our Azure series, okay? Today we're going to be looking at our lab 7, interesting. And in our lab 7, we're going to be getting started with Azure Database for MySQL Flexible Server. So if you're very familiar with AWS, I'm sure you would know Amazon Aurora. And this is just the Azure equivalent for Amazon Aurora. Of course, I'm very much aware about Aurora's functionalities for both MySQL and for PostgreSQL. But for our lab today, we're just going to be focusing on MySQL Flexible Server from Azure. All right. So we can walk through our architecture diagram so we have a good understanding of what we're going to be doing today. So we're going to deploy like a small Azure VM in a public subnet, right? So we are going to have like an app in on the Azure VM right here, and then inside the same virtual network, we're going to create an Azure database for MySQL Flexible Server, which is here, and it's going to be in a private subnet so that it's actually going to be secure and isolated. So for Azure, basically Azure handles high availability automatically across availability zones. And then we're going to add what I will call the read replica, which is a replication of our main database, basically to simulate load balancing and fault tolerance. Okay, so when we get right into the lab, we're going to have a clear view of how this is going to work. But in the meantime, I want you to think of this like running your application servers in one data center, and then you have your database cluster across multiple data centers. So what will happen is that if one zone actually goes down, assuming the availability zone 1 or AZ1 goes down, your application keeps serving users from the other zone. So if we have this zone goes down, it means that we can have data from this second zone serving our users. For example, imagine you're building a ticketing platform, let's say like Party Bank, and your front end runs on the VM, and then our data lives in, of course, my SQL cluster spread across two zones, right? So even if zone 1 has like an outage, zone 2 still has your data available and ready to read. That's high availability in action. So that's exactly what we're going to look at today. For now, let's jump into the Azure portal and set this up step by step. Okay, great. So now we can go ahead to create our virtual networks. can create 2 subnets. Okay. Now we can go ahead to create our virtual machine that we can run our app on. We can go ahead this VM app 7 availability zone 1. We don't need to change anything here, we're good. We've created our virtual network already. Subnet, we could use the public one. So we can allow HTTP. We're not really going to use this, but we can allow SSH. It's not really necessary. So we're good here. Yes, so we can enable system assign manage identity. For monitoring, everything is good. Okay, yeah, so for custom data, so we can actually install. So let me do this. We can actually install, MySQL client, Node, right, on creation of the virtual machine. So I can, copy and paste this here. And we could review and create. So we're good. Okay, perfect. So we can go to our resource. So now we can check for, let me check the network settings. Yes, so for this lab, we'll most likely be using port 3000, but I can create that. Let me allow this, so we can allow for port 3000. Just allow HTTP. Yeah. So yeah, we can move straight into creating our, yes, we can move straight into creating our database server. So yes, for the flexible server. Okay, so now we have the MySQL servers, but recently we've had the MySQL Flexible Servers. Actually, I was doing some research and there's actually a difference, and if you're still using the MySQL servers, you should be thinking of migrating to the flexible servers because it is currently deprecated. And just so you know, yeah, so for the flexible servers, it actually offers private endpoint for better security. And like it says here, it delivers a broader range of Azure monitor metrics, including IO consumption, lock weight, deadlocks, and query duration, which are not available in the single server. But basically, just for you to know, while we have the flexible servers, you might still be using the server, and the flexible server is an improved version or better version. Not necessarily the same, but it has more features, which will make database better for you and I. Okay, so now we can go ahead to creating the flexible server. And like I mentioned, if you're still using the server, you should be thinking of migrating to the flexible server. So this is what we're going to use. We can just call it. We can call it my. Okay, let me just call it MySQL Flexible Server. I'm going Flexible Lab 7. Flex Lab 7. This should be okay. Yes, dev test, availability zone 1. Okay. Private access. Yes, we can use the private one. So we're using the private subnet which we created for MySQL database. Okay, it's going to create the DNS for us. And we're good here. Okay, so this might take a while to create, but it's okay. So yes, I mean, just a reminder about this. The flexible server, like you can see, is designed to offer greater control and customization, which is better than the single server. And the single server has been deprecated. So yes, that's the difference. So there's a difference between the single server and the flexible server. So I'm going to drop this link, right? And we can in the description, and then we can do more research and read more about the flexible server. So yes, because it got me pretty confused when I was trying to create the database. I had initially been using the single server, and I was just trying to check for the difference between the single server and the flexible server, and then this gives us an idea of the other functionalities which are better off using the flexible server. while this is creating, we can go ahead to try and connect to our virtual machine. So I can connect to it through Bastion as usual, and from local file, our username is Azure user, which we had initially, and yes, we have a private key, and we can connect it. Okay, so we can actually check if we have a Node version here. All right, which because we had included, the command to install Node while on creation of the virtual machine. So we can also check MySQL and check the version. Okay, so we have that on our virtual machine. All right, so we can keep track if this is done creating. So while it's still creating, we can try to create a directory called app, and then we can cd into our app, and then we can initialize npm. Okay, and before we go ahead, let's install Express, because we're going to create a very simple application to run on the virtual machine. So install Express and body parser. Oh, great. So we have this. It take a few minutes, but it will be done soon. Okay, perfect. So this is created, so we can go to our flexible server. All right. So of course there are several resources that could give us guide through whatever you want to do. If you're trying to create a migration service and you want to learn more about migration, you can read up on all of these. You can start and read up. But what I was majorly concerned about for this lab was setting up a single database schema, right? So I already opened this to review. For other things, there are a lot of resources for us to go through. So we can check on our databases and we can create a very simple database. I've got this sample DB and I'll save that. So it's going to create a sample database for us, and this is what we're going to be using for this lab. Okay, great. So now I want to create like a JavaScript file, but it's something I had already written. So we have that in our code folder. So we have the file to insert data and the file to retrieve data. So all we just have to do is that we just have to copy this, and it creates the insert data file in our app folder on our VM, right? So I can paste this and then we're good. So if I open up the insert data, so we can see the script that we have here. Basically, you can walk through it, but the idea is that we're basically connecting to the database, and also we have like the post and the app, function that would just allow us to create data or send data to the database. And yeah, we're also going to have our retrieve file, which we're going to create, that would allow us retrieve files from, or retrieve data from, the database. So all I just have to do is I have to come to my host to change this. I have to change the host, so I can come to overview to copy the host, the endpoint right here, and I can paste that. And also I already have the database sample DB, but now I need to put in my password. So this is just for sample, and I can save this and exit. So I can also do the same for my retrieve. I can do the same for the retrieving data, or for retrieve data. So I can copy this, can come here, and we're good. So if I get into the retrieve data file, you can see all I need to do is to change, the host name. I can use the same host name that I just used. So I can copy this, I can paste this here, and I can have the Flex Lab 2025, and I can save this and exit this. Okay, so now since I've edited that, what I can do is that I can run it. So I can run it using the node. Okay, so the table has been created and the server has started on port 3000. So we're basically using port 3000, as our port. That's why I added it to the virtual machine for inbound, right? And yes, it connected to the DB, and when it connects to the DB, it just says, and creates the table, it says the table has been created successfully, right? So what we want to do now is that when we call just the endpoint, right, is going to show us a form. It's going to show us a form where we can input email address and name. So we can try that out. So if I go to the virtual machine where we have our app running on, we have our public IP here. So I can open a new tab, and then I can run 3000. Okay, so we have, I can put in email address, and I can just put in my name, and I can insert record. So when I insert record, it tells me that, oh, yeah, my record has been inserted. So that's for the, inserting data. So if I stop the server from running and I reload, right? Yeah, it stopped. So now I can also run the retrieve. Okay, yes, and if I reload this, okay, so now you can see it's getting the data. So if I add more data, of course you're going to see it's going to give us more. So we could try an example of stopping this, and so let's try Calvin John. Okay, great. So if I stop the server and I try to retrieve data, okay, just try it a few more times. Okay, so we have, Jonathan Martins, and then we have Kevin John. So it means that we've connected to the database. We are successfully inserting data to the database, and then we can retrieve data from the database, which is what we have here. So we have an app, and then we can send data to the database, and we can retrieve data from the database. But now we are talking about like the read replica. So I want you to also imagine that we are having like the same endpoint, which you have seen. We have just the same. Let me show you. Okay, so okay. Okay, so this endpoint. So we have the same endpoint for sending data to the database and also for retrieving data from the database. So yeah, it could pose as a flaw because, or it could result on error because imagine we have high traffic and high volume, and then we are as well sending data using the same URL as well as retrieving data using the same URL. This might pose as a problem in the nearest future. So what we want to do is we want to create like a read replica, right? So now we've been able to access the web app, works very well. So now we want to be able to add a read replica so that it helps us in terms of in the aspect of scalability, right? Where we can send data to the database using one endpoint, and then we can retrieve data from the other endpoint or from our read replica database. So what happens is that when we create this one, it reads data from here, and you do not send data to the to this what's it called, read replica. And then in the case of failure, if there's going to be an issue, what happens is that it spins up a new instance in no time, and then this would give us high availability because we have our database into or running on two regions basically. So let me so we can go to so I can just, I think it should be in settings. Yeah, so replication. Okay, so now we cannot create a replica because replica is not supported for the bustable pricing tier. We're currently on the bustable pricing tier, and for us to be able to create a replica, we need to change our tier to maybe general purpose or memory optimized. And if I check, okay, yeah, so we have a general purpose tier, and then we have the business critical, which is the memory optimized tier. So if I change this, I could change this, and yeah, to general purpose, so we can just show how we can add a read replica for the purpose of scalability. So we can actually scale reading of the data from the database. So this will also take a while as it did earlier, but we should be able to do this in no time. So this is going to take a while. Okay, great. So now we can go to our resource, and if we go to replication again, you would see that okay, now it can allow us to add a replica. So we can add a replica and we can just call it MySQL, let's say Flexible Server replica, and we can use another availability zone 2. Everything is okay. We can review this and then we can create a replica. This will take a little while to create. Again, clear this, and then we just wait for our flexible server to finish its deployment. It's taking a while, but we'll be done soon. I mean, of course, you can skip all these parts, but this is a live demo, so I can't really cut short videos. So in about a minute, this should be done, or less than a minute. So it takes about 6 to 7 minutes. Okay, perfect. So now we can go to the resource, and if we check, this gives us a new endpoint, right? So what can happen is that I can copy this and I can go to, yes, retrieve, and I can change to the replica host or replica endpoint. Okay, so I can save this. So now if I run node retrieve data and I check, I reload this, right? I'm able to retrieve data. I'm able to retrieve data still from this. So if I stop this, it doesn't work. And now if I try to retrieve data, I can retrieve data. So it's retrieving data using the replica endpoint, right? So now if I try to, because I have an endpoint right here to add user. So I just want to show you that if I try to add user using the replica endpoint or the replica host, it's not going to permit us to do that. So if I do add user, you can see the server is running with the read-only option, so you cannot execute this statement, which means that for this I cannot, just write into it. So basically we're using it to retrieve, so that now when we want to write, we can use this to write, and then when we want to retrieve, we can use this to retrieve. And yes, of course, like I mentioned, Azure automatically handles availability, which means that if one zone is down, automatically it creates a new connection. But now the new connection that it creates is going to be in a new availability zone, which is the AZ2. We would be able to replicate that, but it's going to cost us. So for example, if I go to this and I check my compute and storage, right here I can see high availability, right? So if I change this and I try to create high availability and I try to save, it tells me that my bill is going to increase to about 281 USD. But you can actually try to do that. If you're able to enable high availability, then you want to just perform like a restart with failover, or you can do like the start and stop of. So if you're able to do that, then you can just restart, or you can stop and then start again, and you'll be able to replicate. But the idea is that Azure basically handles the failover for us. We just need to make sure that our application knows how to retry the connection when it happens. So if you want to go ahead to test it, this is okay. You can simulate a failover by restarting the server with failover enabled. Yes, of course, our application is going to lose connection briefly, and then it's going to reconnect automatically to the same endpoint, but it's going to be in the new availability zone, which is going to be zone 2. Okay. So yes, so that's pretty much it for our lab 7. And as usual, we have to try and delete our resources. So very simple or very easy to delete our resources, because we created all resources in the same resource group, so we can just delete this resource group. So I'm going to do that. So I'm thinking if there's anything I'm missing. So we're able to test this, and yes, we're able to check, and we're good. Yes, so there's nothing I'm missing out. So we can go ahead to delete our resources. And all our resources in this resource group is going to be deleted. And that's it for lab 7, where we had to work with Azure database for MySQL Flexible Server, this is like I mentioned, the Azure equivalent of Amazon Aurora dealing with the MySQL functionality. So today we've been able to learn how to deploy a secure MySQL server inside the VNet. We've been able to connect to it from an Azure VM using private access, which we've seen, and also there's higher availability, and also we also try to create a replica across 2 zones, the 1 and the availability zone 2. If this helped you understand how Azure handles relational databases and fault tolerance, please give this video a like, you subscribe, and share it with a friend who is also learning cloud, especially Azure. Until then, I'm Jonathan Martins, and this has been Lab 7 of our Azure Labs series. So as usual, continue to stay curious, stay building, and I'll see you in the next lab.